want answers.
I want the truth.
Hello and welcome to the Real Eyes, Real Eyes, Real Lies podcast. I will be your host through this epic journey that we are going on together. My name is Georgina Grace, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here, and how excited and grateful and so blessed that you are here with me on this journey. It's a really big deal for me to be starting a podcast, a really big deal. And I will share with you throughout this episode just how big of a deal this is and why it's such a big deal for me. But for right now, I just wanted to introduce the podcast a little bit and why I had to do this. It is something that I have been talking about, thinking about for a long time, and honestly, very terrifying for me. So I have been putting it off. And I guess also waiting for the right readiness, for myself, for my family, everything. And this podcast is, it's called the Real Eyes, Real Eyes, Real Lies podcast, because we're opening our eyes throughout this journey to the truths, not just of ourselves. It starts there, of course. It always starts with ourselves, but opening our eyes up to the truths of the world in which we live in. And I will be inviting some pretty profound guests onto the podcast, from all walks of life, from the medical background, from people who have had extraordinary experiences throughout their life, people, every area. I say medical, I also mean just like health, the truth in the universe, the truth in the frequencies, truth in spirituality, in religion, in to the shoes that we wear, So this podcast is all about seeking truth. In fact, that was that was one of the names I considered for this podcast, the Truth Seeker podcast. And the name Real Eyes, Real Eyes, Real Lies came to my husband while he was in the shower. And so that's where I have learned recently, a place where most downloads happen. So in water, having a shower, bath, like that. So it seemed like, that's the name that it's meant to have. And I've done the numerology on it and it fits. It works really, really, really well. So this podcast really, for me, is an opportunity for healing. Really, as you will learn as I share more about my story, speaking, literally just speaking, for me out loud, actually took quite a lot of healing for me over the years. And it's been quite a journey for me to not just rediscover my voice, but to actually accept it, love it, appreciate it, understand that I have things to say and that people want to hear what I have to say. That for me is such, it's massive. It is humongous. And I know that I'm not the only one in the world who feels this way. We grow up in environments where our environment doesn't want to hear us. Children should be seen and not heard is a common example of something that we often hear or heard growing up. And so that really conditions us. It definitely conditioned me. So learning how to speak words out loud was a journey in itself and took immense healing. But the next layer to that, or many layers, is actually speaking out loud that which is actually my truth. That is something that is, terrifying, to say the least. And here I am. This podcast is kind of like the ultimate mode of healing for me. And I'm really hoping that it will be that for many, many, many other people. I creating this podcast for that purpose, to be a platform for people to share their truth, whatever area of life you're from, whatever niche you are in. I want this podcast to seek truth and only truth, no matter how big, no matter how ugly, no matter how gross, no matter how much it means we may have to change a lot in our life because of certain truths. No matter how much it hurts to hear some things or to see some things. I want the truth, and I want the truth to be out there for everyone to hear it and make their own minds up about it. Because if we're not dealing with truth, if we are not living a life from truth, about truth, and for truth, then what are we living if it's not the truth? So that is why I'm here. That is why this podcast is here. And I just want to thank you for tuning in, listening in, and joining me and supporting this podcast on this epic journey that we are going to be on. Now, it is not all going to be serious, okay? I promise you, it will not be serious. There will be serious moments, but this is going to be fun because, in my opinion, if it's not fun, it's boring, right? I find it a lot easier to learn when I'm enjoying the process, when I'm having fun, when I can have a laugh. Okay, so I am also a ruling 30/3 and in numerology, which I am a numerologist. And I do readings and courses, but we'll get to that later. This is the number of intuition, of communication. So more reason for me to start a podcast, because I need to communicate. I have a lot to say. But the threes love to laugh. They love humor. They love banter. They love wit. And so this is this podcast. Now, the thing about the three energy also is that they need to feel safe in order to really allow their full, true expression to come out. And three energies will feel safer in smaller groups than they do with larger crowds. And so for me, doing this podcast solo was a really big deal, because it means I am healing a part of me that needs someone external to myself in order to feel safe. And so doing this solo means I now need to create a safe space for myself, which is scary. It's really scary. The inner child in me is screaming right now because she knows what she's going to say during this episode. And that's scary. So I want you to bear with me during this episode because it's challenging. It's actually challenging for me to say some of the things and go into the things that I know that I'm going to go into. And I made some notes for this episode. I really thought that it would be a good idea for me to jot down some topics, some things that I want to talk about. And when I sat down to do that, I found myself, I wrote down, introduce yourself and welcome everybody to the podcast. I then wrote birth. The next thing I wrote was birth. and then and then and then I wrote truth and trust. Those are my notes. Those are the notes that I wrote for this episode, which doesn't give me much to go on other than truth and trust. Birth, truth, and trust. What does this mean? So, my intention there really is everything starts with birth. I was like, where the heck do I start this episode? Where do I start? I want to talk about my life. Where do I start? And I just went, well, everything starts with birth. So let's start there. Let's start with birth. And then I wrote truth because I need to remind myself not to sugarcoat things, not to shy away from the details, because the truth, what we want is the truth. What I want is the truth. So I've got to demand that from myself first and foremost. And to trust the process, trust myself, trust that I will know exactly what needs to be said, that what I will say is exactly what needs to be said, so just trusting in myself, my intuition, my guidance, my heart, just trust. So you will get used to me and my little expressive outbursts. They are space fillers, For me, it's like, okay, where am I going from here? Rather than there being a big gap of silence, let me just insert some inaudible sound. Does anyone else do this? Am I the only one? Because I do it often. My husband says to me, "You're always singing." Because, yeah, I am. But I don't notice it half the time. Not anymore, anyway. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling. This is what happens when I'm nervous. See, I start rambling, and you're listening to this. You're like, get to the point. Okay. All right. So my birth. This is where we're starting from the beginning. I was born in the Philippines in this lifetime. I was born in the Philippines in Manila, very populated part of the world. And when I was born, I had 3 older sisters already. My mom had a stillborn actually right before me, and he would have been the only boy in the family. So it's really, really tragic. There are questions around how he actually died or passed. My mum says that my mum says that he was born with a big hole in his belly, and that's obviously why. But there are some questions, and you'll learn more about that a little bit later. But yeah, so I was the 4th born child from my mum. She had 3 girls before me to a different man than my dad. And my dad is Australian. He was born and raised in a town called Derby in Tasmania. And my dad was actually significantly older than my mum. So my dad was in his 60s when I was born, and my mum was in her mid to late 30s. And my dad, my dad, my my good old dad. Unfortunately, most of the memories I have from my dad are quite horrific. And the things that I endured with this man or from this man, not just me, my entire family, really set the tone for the rest of my life. And so my dad was, he had he was in the mining industry for a time, mining opals in Tasmania from memory. And he also served in the Korean War, which is often the forgotten war, but it was equally as horrific as all the wars. I believe he was dishonorably discharged from that war, which already gives you a little bit of information about his character. He was a very actually charming and charismatic man. He was able to fool people pretty well. He was tall, dark hair. He had kind of bluish gray kind of eyes, I think, or some kind of hazily color. Funnily enough, I didn't spend too much time actually looking into his eyes as a kid. But yeah, so I was born in the Philippines in Manila, and at around 9 months old, we moved to Australia. My dad had adopted my three older sisters, and obviously there was me that came as well because I'm his daughter. So we moved to Australia. He'd also adopted a couple of my cousins as well so that they could come to Australia. Our living situation in the Philippines was quite, on the poverty line, which is quite common in the Philippines, which is a very, 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 very populated country. And my dad, from what I've learnt from my older sisters sharing with me, is that what he promised when they were in the Philippines was this big extravagant life back in Australia, that he was super rich and wealthy, and and everyone loved him. Everyone loves him in the Philippines and thinks he's just amazing, this amazing human being, kind of rescuing this single mom of three girls and like that. Anyway, so we come to Australia and it was all lies. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't even really have a house, So it was really like my three older sisters being, they were all around the age of like 10. So like when I think it was like 7, 8, 10-ish kind of age, they were totally like shocked. They'd come to this whole new country. They didn't know the language. They'd been promised this big extravagant life, and it's not that at all. And the man that promised all of this was not. It was like he changed instantly. They came through the Australian borders. So my dad was a predator. He was a psychopath. There's really no other way to put it. He loved little girls, loved little girls. Little girls were his thing. And he preyed on me, on my sisters, on any little girl that he could, honestly. Any little girl that he could. And he was also violent, awfully violent. I would lay awake listening to screams of my mum through the night after night, screams, waking up to her bruised and battered face, and her telling me that everything's okay and she's, just fell or tripped or something. But I knew that that was a lie because I'd laid awake all night listening to her screaming. So he was an awful, awful, awful psychotic predator who preyed on a vulnerable woman who had three delicious girls. And then obviously myself, I came along and my younger sister. And that was my childhood with this man. So any opportunity he could, he would abuse me. He would abuse me. And it was horrific abuse. So when I say that I spent a long time in my life just learning how to speak out loud without going into a complete and utter fear and survival state, I have pretty strong memories. My dad, being ex-army, he had all of these weapons. He had guns. I just remember them being long guns. I don't know if they were like shotguns or rifles or what they were. I just remember them being long, and I'm pretty sure he had two of them and they were hung up on the mantelpiece or on the wall somewhere. And he also had pistols and stuff like that. He used to have he used to give his pistol to me to play with when I was really, really young, like, less than 4 years old, and they would be loaded. And I didn't know that's what I was playing with. My sisters have told me later on that, yeah, they were fully loaded, and he would, because he just found it hilarious. This is the kind of thing that he would get a kick out of. This man, he would get a kick out of watching us literally play with death. He was a psychopath. He would stand out in the rain, in the storm, thunder, lightning, and he would be like, howling, laughing, and playing with himself. Just like absolute psychotic human being. Questionable human, Is this person actually human? Is there anyone that can do these horrific things to young children, to babies? Are they even human? So he used to do these things and let us play with their guns, but there's times where he would be abusing me, sexually abusing me, and he would say to me, sometimes he would point at the gun. Sometimes he would verbally say that if I said anything, if I spoke, he would be forced to use those guns on my mum. So I learnt very quickly not to speak. And when I was that age, very young, my parents got a divorce or separated. I think I was around the age of 4 or 5 I remember it because that was when we had to pack up and move out of our family home, that we moved to Australia, and we lived our first home after moving to Australia. That I remember. I know there was a stint that we did in Melbourne before coming down to Tasmania, but I don't have strong memories of that time. So, I lost my place. Yes, that's right. So this is the problem doing a solo podcast, is that if I lost my place, there would be someone else to jump in and be like, blah, 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 blah. Sorry. So I learned very quickly not to speak. And when you're that young, you don't know the difference between what is good speaking and what is not good speaking. So no one tells you what's good speaking, right? So I just learned not to speak. And literally, being a young adult going through the world, and I'm like pretty independent. I actually left home when I was about 13, 14. So I've been independent for a very long time. However, speaking was really, really, really terrifying for me. Really terrifying. And, you know, I would order something from a cafe, wherever. I would order food or a drink or whatever. They'd ask me a question like, what flavor do you want? Or what type of milk do you want? Or something really simple and general. But like I would totally freeze up, so much so that I would run out of the establishment. I just couldn't. I couldn't actually just say what type of milk I wanted because, or make it, and that was just in that situation. But making any decision that, if it was a decision I to make on my own without having to vocalize the decision to someone else, I would be okay with doing that because it was within me, and it wouldn't require actual speaking. But if it was to require actual speaking, it would be literally as if someone was coming at me, like to kill me. That was the threat kind of scenario that I would go into. And so I learned that whenever I learned to speak in a way that was how do I put it, like everything I said was a joke, it was all just like smoke screens and like like just do the fluffy stuff, just say what people want you to hear, be how people want you to hear, because then you don't have to show yourself, show the truth. If people learnt the truth about me, oof, I used to walk around thinking that I was a freak. So something severely actually wrong with me from at my core, because what kind of person has this kind of stuff done to them growing up? You know what I mean? Like, I must be the scum of the earth that someone like my dad, you know? Ugh. So I grew up really not with the greatest outlook of myself. So you're starting to see how important, how critical, how humongous this podcast is for me, and how terrified I am to be doing this, how nervous, and equally how excited and proud of myself I am for doing this. And, if any of my sisters or, family or whatever end up listening to this, sorry, I'm not going to share your names because I'm gonna share my truth the way that it exists for me, my version, my truth, and you're all part of that. So I won't use your names. I might come up with other names for you to protect your privacy. But I can't share my truth without sharing the fact that I have sisters, that I have family. So yeah. And so, yes, as I said, I left home. My home life was pretty chaotic, pretty volatile. My sisters, obviously, they, there was a period of time where, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. And sometimes this happens because my memories are all over the place, and like sifting through them is challenging in itself. So yeah, just forgive me for the scrambled memories. Yes, so my sisters would often have house parties as they started to become come into their adolescence, into their like teen years, and also like, you know, they have all this trauma from being brought over by this amazing man that promised the world and then totally pulled the rug from under them. And not only that, he is literally, you know, embodied hell as a human. Like, he is a hellish man. You know, so there's not only is there teenage angst and going through puberty and all of those changes, but also it's like there is the huge background of all of this craziness going on. So my sisters coming into their adolescence, coming into their real teen years, would just act out and do things that troubled or challenged teenagers would do. And you know, mum would work 24/7, quite literally, like 24/7. She was barely home. Who knows where my dad was, probably out gambling somewhere because he had a gambling problem. So they would have house parties, and that meant that a lot of the time the house was full of crazy, high, drunk, you know, teenagers, strangers for me at that age, being like 3 or 4 years old, and just the house being alive with just like crazy loud music, people everywhere. And I don't know any of them. Like it just wasn't a safe environment at all. I have memories of like nursing one of my sisters while she was passed out, and she'd overdosed or something. The ambulance were on their way. I just remember being in the bathtub, nursing her in my lap, waiting for the ambulance to come, and being fully aware that she had overdosed somehow or had drank too much or something along those lines. Like I knew what that meant at that age. That was pretty ridiculous. Well, not like scary. It was really scary. And so this is, I didn't have safe or stable parents. I didn't have a safe or stable environment. I I desired that more than anything. I just wanted to feel safe. I just wanted to be a little kid. And, you know, I remember vividly after I don't know how many house parties, I got used to like, okay, this is the routine. This is kind of what happens at these things. They get really crazy. Like I remember being squished into the back of the car in the middle of the night with someone driving. I don't even know if they were legal age drivers or not, but everyone was drunk in my opinion. But I was being squished into the back of this car. I don't know how many people were in this car, and there's definitely more people in the car than legally allowed to be in the car. But I remember just being squished, and then this person was driving in the road in front of our house, just doing like donuts, round and round and round and round. I was absolutely terrified, but I had actually, from memory, I'd actually begged my sister, or who it was either sister or sisters, I can't remember, to let me come with them because I was scared that if they went by themselves that they might die, like something bad would happen. And I, like, you know, little 3, 4-year-old me was going to be there to protect them, you know. So, and I also just didn't want to be alone in the house full of total strangers. So it was like, oh, I'll choose the car. Crazy. But yeah, so not a very stable or safe environment to kind of grow up in. It was pretty freaking full on, and really intense trauma I have learnt since going through lots of different healing modalities from those house parties. And yeah, again, if any of my sisters are listening to this, I don't blame you for any of this at all. I really understand. I get it. Don't hold anything towards you, in fact. But this is, again, truth from my perspective. And, why I'm sharing all of this is because this is, like I said, this podcast is a platform for truth, to have real eyes, open our eyes to the realities of the world. And for a lot of us, the realities of the world, we don't have to look far. There is plenty of reality right here in front of us that we first need to open our eyes to realize the lies that are placed there. And a lot of the lies that my dad, he did a lot of horrific things over the years to myself, to literally any little girl, anyone that he could get his hands on, basically. A lot of horrific things. I've shared with you some of the stuff. If I shared you everything, we would be here for such a long time. And he got away with it all. He got away with it. This man had a record. He'd been dishonorably discharged. The most he ever had to deal with was a 2-year stint in jail, where very late in his life, and that was really the most that this man actually dealt with in terms of consequences. So one questions, this is where the beginning of my journey of questioning all authority, not trusting the people that say that you can trust them, came from, all the way from this man. And so there is a lot in my life that I've gone through, that I've dealt with, that I've had to endure. But I can now I can now look back on it all, because hindsight is really something. Well, they say hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? But I can now look back and actually be grateful. I know that sounds really crazy to say that, but I can be grateful, not only for the experiences that I have been through, but for my dad. Yep. Because you know what? I spent a long time hating this man, resenting this man, particularly while he was still alive, and refusing to forgive him. Refusing. How can I forgive someone who did what he did to me? To all of the people that he did those things to. How could I forgive that? For a long time, I was actually confusing forgiveness with, if I forgave him, that means I'm making it right. I'm making it okay. I'm making what he did right. And that is not true. That is not why we forgive. We don't forgive to make it okay, to get them off the hook. Not at all. That is not forgiveness. We forgive to set ourselves free. This man haunted so much of my life. Oh. And a big reason for me, not a big reason, but one of the reasons why I made it my mission to survive, right? No matter what, to survive, is because, honestly, he was an absolute piece of shit. It was an absolute piece of shit. And I am not gonna let that piece of shit dictate how my life goes. No freaking way. Are you kidding me? He's already taken my childhood. I'm going to sit here and let him take my life as well, my adulthood. I've got so much of my life left. So much. He doesn't get to take that too. And I'd be lying to say that that it didn't come close, you know? I never I have attempted suicide a few times, but never from I don't want to be here anymore. Like not from me, like me, I don't want to live anymore. It was never from that place. And I'd only just kind of discovered this recently through a conversation I had with my soul sister, my best friend in the whole world, Alexandra. I love you so much. And thank you for giving me this gift of having this conversation with you because it made such a difference to me. So I only just realized recently that those suicide attempts it was never from me. It was never because I wanted to go. I didn't want to be here anymore. It was never because of that, actually. It was because so much crappy crap shit, for one way of putting it, happened over a very like short period of time. Like by the time I was not even 16. Do you know what I mean? Like so much, so much. It was just like thing after thing after thing. I was convinced there was all of this evidence in the world that I wasn't meant to be here. Do you know what I mean? And I know that that can be debatable. Like, well, it means the same thing. You know, you're essentially saying the same thing, just in a different way. But for me, it for me is a huge distinction between I'm going to end my life because I don't want to be here anymore. I've had enough. I don't want to be here. And I don't think I'm actually meant to be here. Like maybe there was a mistake, maybe, you know, and like it just really doesn't seem like I'm supposed to be here, do you know? And so that for me is a huge, huge, huge distinction. It was never because I didn't want to. Never. I just thought there was a mistake that happened, you know. And I remember my mum, she shared with me that she only tried again after my brother had passed because she wanted a boy. She didn't actually want another girl. And when she became pregnant with me after my brother had passed, she was really excited because this is the boy now. This is the boy coming. And they never found out, you know, what sex the baby was. I came out, sorry, no penis. But in my little brain, when she told me this, it was like devastating. Oh, she doesn't actually want me. I'm not wanted. So that in the background of all of this craziness happening, the abuse and everything, and then thing after thing, like I left home when I was like 13, 14. And when I say left, I ran away. Quite literally, I ran for my life away from that house because it was horrible, 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 horrible. The abuse, though my dad wasn't around, there was lots of other versions of abuse and violence that happened in the house. And home was not a safe place for me whatsoever. So, the people I thought I could rely on and feel safe with were not people I could rely on and feel safe with at all. So I left home really young and I was kind of on my own from a really, really, really young age. And and then from the moment of leaving home, which was for me, the best thing I ever did, because it gave me the opportunity, it was like hitting the reset button. I was somewhere I couldn't breathe. I was dying in that environment, and it was the best thing I ever did for myself. It was literally me taking a stand and actually fighting for myself, fighting for my survival, fighting for my life. Quite literally, it was like, this is the most terrifying thing that I could ever do, ever, is run away from home. When I ran away, I knew that when I left, there was no going back. If I had gone back to that house, I probably would have been beaten to death for running away, and I'm not even joking. That was the truth. The night that I ran away, I ran to one of my sister's house and spent the night there. But my mum, when she found out that I wasn't home, whoa, whoa. I left the house at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. No one had actually noticed I was gone till around 9 o'clock at night, to which my mum had called up my sister, screaming at her over the phone. I remember hiding in a neighbour's house, put my luggage of all of the things I thought I needed to be on my own under her bed. I thought that was a good hiding place. Turns out it wasn't. I was hiding in a neighbour's house who I happened to go to school with. I didn't really know him that well, the poor guy. So I was sitting in his lounge room in the dark because we didn't want to have any lights on and, like attract her to us in the dark. But I remember her sitting in his lounge room with him sitting next to me. We had like a little hand torch on. And my mum was walking up and down the street screaming my name and also screaming that she was going to kill me. So I don't know why she thought that maybe that was an inviting thing, like, oh yes, mum's going to kill me, I better go now, So I stayed in that guy's lounge room silently, feeling so awkward as heck because I don't really know you that well. You're just someone I know, at school. I see you. I was younger too. It was really kind of awkward. Poor guy. But thank you. You really kind of saved my life that night. So when I eventually went back to my sister's, mum had found the luggage. She'd taken everything. So all I had was the clothes that I was wearing and the little Nokia 3315 that I had that was all I had. No clothes, no identification, nothing. So obviously staying with my sister wasn't a safe place. So I ended up moving towns, taking the first, bus at I don't even know what time, like 6 o'clock in the morning, to another town, staying with another family member. One of the cousins that I mentioned earlier that my dad had adopted. My mum didn't get along with her well, so I knew, that was safe, at least from my mum. But so and it was just, and then that cousin, she was very, very, very Christian, and I was very, very, very not, and so that didn't go well either. And she politely suggested that I move out. It wasn't working for me to be staying with her after about 2 months. And it was also at the end of the high school year, and she got me into her son's Christian school for the last 2 months, which was pretty freaking hell. It was really intense. I met some beautiful, beautiful people in that school, but that were like angels, sent to kind of be a light in my life, something positive, something nice. But no, I wasn't down for the religion. I don't know what it is. I definitely grew up in the Catholic religion. My mum is Catholic, and we went, to all the Sunday school and the first I can't think of the word, the first communion, that's it. We did all of that stuff as kids, but sorry to all of the Catholics, but the church, it was just cold. They had these really pooey heaters under the pews that were just they were just terrible. They didn't really emit any heat whatsoever. It was freezing, especially in Tasmania. Freezing, freezing, like -2, -3, like just so, so cold. And I don't understand, like, why all these adults, being a kid, and like as a kid, adults have all the power. Do you know what I mean? But then seeing all of these adults stand in this church, and it was just, I don't know, it just never made sense to me. Like, there was this guy in a robe at the front, in front of a microphone. He'd stand with a book or whatever, and sometimes he'd climb up these stairs and be up this, like, up here, and I just was like, why? Why do you need to walk up the stairs and be in this little, I don't know, it was like a little tree house kind of thing, just to read more from a book that made no sense to me. But, and then all the adults in the crowd would stand when the man at the front in the robe said stand. Then they would sit, then they would kneel, then they would sit again, then they would stand. And it was just like, I don't get it. You're all adults. Why are you just doing, it was like, this is how they train, like dogs. To sit, to stand, to kneel. And it never made sense to me from that age. So any religion has never really made sense to me. Anything that you give, that asks you to give your power away to it, to put your power into it, to put your faith, put your love, put your trust, put yourself into it. Anything that asks you to do that has always been a problem for me, because it's really, it doesn't, if you're giving your power to something or someone else, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sport, whether it's religion, whether it's ballet. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. It's taking it away from you. And so where does that leave you? Where does that leave you and your power? In the hands of someone or something else? Well, that's not okay with me. That doesn't work for me. When I was young, someone would take my power away from me, forcefully take it away, left me with nothing, with no power, would leave me in pain, traumatized, and would often tell me that it was my fault. Look what you made me do. So growing up, I started seeing a lot of that, but just in many different ways. And a lot of the things that happen in life have never made sense to me. Things that are regularly accepted have never made sense to me. Why would you actively give it away? I know what it's like to have it forcefully taken away from you, and what it's like to not have it, to not hold your power within yourself, to not have a say, to not be able to speak up, and not. Why would you do that willingly in any aspect, small or large? It never made sense to me. And as you can tell, it still makes no sense to me. And so this is, for a long time though, I will absolutely be the first one to admit that I absolutely spent a big chunk of my time trying to make that make sense and trying to go along with it, because I thought I didn't want to draw attention to myself, which is funny because I often did draw attention to myself. Like, I grew up with a really messed up view of myself, obviously, but also a really messed up view of my worth, of what people wanted from me, I assumed that all I was good for, and this is going to sound pretty self-deprecating and really, ugh, but I guess I really thought that all people really wanted was from me was like my body, this physical body that I lived in. That was my currency for a long time. And I used to dress in that way, like really provocative, really very like short shorts and, crop tops and like really like you want it, come and get it kind of thing, and I thought I really, I really thought, which sounds very naive, that that's all that I was good for. That's all people wanted from me because I learnt not to speak. So people don't want to hear what I have to say. They just want they just want this. But that was my reality. It wasn't like, oh, poor me, this is all people want from me, where. I thought, oh, okay, that's all people want from me. So that's what I'll give them, right? And I really didn't it took me a long time to regain the ownership of my body. That sounds crazy to not think you're not the owner of your own body. But this is something that was used and abused and taken. I could say no. I could plead. I could beg. I could scream for it to not be taken. That didn't make any difference. So in a young person's mind, well, that's just a big scream in the face that it's not yours, so you've got no control over this thing. And I learned that if you give people what they want, you can also get what you want, so I really used it as like a currency. And not that I slept around a lot, which I didn't. I really didn't actually. Sex was something that was kind of scary for me, and I didn't know how. It was just I never had a really good relationship with sex. I never knew what healthy sex was or anything. It was just like, so it was kind of something I avoided at all cost as much as I could. But I used my sexuality, I guess, to get what I want. I didn't know any other way, honestly. I mean, I really thought I was stupid. Like, I really believed in this. Oh, I really thought I was stupid. I mean, I'd never been able to actually speak out loud, truly, my truth out loud, to have a really good gauge of whether I have anything worthy to say. So and whenever someone would ask me a question, I just like absolutely freeze and not know where to go and wouldn't be able to answer the question, like, and that still shows up to a certain extent. Like, I'm terrible at trivia. I'm good at knowing the answers. I'm just not good at like in the second responding, because that freeze happens and I'm just all of a sudden it's someone's choking me. So, which is also more trauma from my childhood, right? Actually being choked. So, I really always thought that I was stupid. And so I didn't think I had much going for me other than, well, it seems like the thing that people want and acknowledges and approves of to a certain extent is this physical thing that meant absolutely nothing to me. In fact, I spent a long time hating this body. It was this body's fault. If this body wasn't the way that this body was, half of the stuff that I had to deal with growing up wouldn't have happened, because I wouldn't have had a body. Like, I really thought that if I just didn't have a body, which is quite interesting in itself with the things that I have been learning very recently, and I'll go into that. That's a whole other thing, probably a whole other podcast in itself. But yeah. So So there I am. I've just gone on a huge. How did I even get there? Anyway, so yeah, I used my body. I don't know why I got there and how I got there, but that's where we are. And that's all I thought that I was worth, you know. Um, so it took a lot for me to learn that there's so much more to me than than just a body, you know, and it took a lot for me to learn that I am beautiful. I'm not just a sexy piece of skin. Do you know what I mean? I'm actually beautiful. Aesthetically, but also internally. And so the words that you are listening to today, this person that you are listening to, trying to encapsulate the journey that I've been on to get to this point, to be able to speak to you this, I'm going to say articulately. Is that a word, articulately? Articulate? oh, oh, oh. You know what I'm saying? This well. To be able to speak this well about some of the deepest truths of my life and be able to laugh at myself when I say a word that I don't even know is the right word. Because in the past, that would have been it. Show over, done, never doing this again. I made a mistake in something I said. I cannot possibly encapsulate what it has taken to get to this point in a single episode. But I'm sensing that you're starting to get it. You're starting to understand even just a little bit of what it has taken and the journey that I have been on that has led me here. I am so blessed to have such a magnificent, juicy, joyful, full of love and abundance kind of life. I'm so grateful. So grateful. And for a long time, I really resisted the word survivor. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I'm a survivor of physical abuse, of narcissistic abuse, of psycho inhumane abuse. Many forms of abuse I've survived through, but I resisted for a long time calling myself a survivor because I didn't just survive. That was never the goal for me, to just survive, just make it through, just scrape through. That was never the goal. I knew, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I would always say to myself, it's for a reason. I was young. I was really young. I started saying this to myself before the age of 10, you know? My earliest memories of life was of my father abusing me. Earliest memories from when I could walk. And I started walking at 9 months old. They say, science says that kids don't remember anything before they're 4 because that place in their brain that holds memory, I guess, isn't fully developed until the age of 4. Except I have a lot of memories. And often if people do have a lot of memories before the age of 4, they're usually traumatizing, traumatic memories. And that's why they remember them, because they're so traumatic. Well, I have a ridiculous amount of memories before the age of 4. So that says a lot. um, and I started saying this to myself, that this is happening for a reason, you know, much like 6, 7 years old. I'd say this to myself internally in my head. It's happening for a reason. This is happening for a reason. There must be a reason for this. And I don't know where I got that from, or like no one was saying that to me growing up. In fact, the abuse that we all went through wasn't spoken about for the longest time, really, until I was in my 20s, mid 20s. I thought I was the only one in the entire house that my dad was doing this to. Oh, because none of it was spoken about. And I spent also a long time thinking I'd made it up. That's how much it was not a topic of conversation whatsoever. I thought I was actually insane, that I had made up all of these things. How could I have done that? I'm really messed up in the head. There's something severely wrong with me. I had all of the horrible, like, nightmares and sleep paralysis, and all of these horrific experiences throughout my young adult life that would obviously suggest that something pretty intense happened, but I really thought I made it all up. And a lot of my memories didn't fully form, didn't come back, because obviously I learned that I dissociated actually from a lot of my childhood. And interestingly, I remember sharing with my husband some time ago that my memories of my childhood are always in like bird's eye view. So I am looking at the memory. I see my younger self in the house down here, and I see things happening, but I'm up here looking down at this memory, and that's how I remember them. And I thought that that's just how you remembered memories. But according to him, he was actually quite, when I remember stuff, I'm like looking through my own eyes. It's like point of view, and that's how I remember it. So that's kind of when I was like, oh, something's up there. Something, I should look into that. And yeah, all of my childhood memories are through a bird's eye view lens, which I learned meant I didn't just dissociate when the abuse was happening. I dissociated from my entire childhood, the entire experience I dissociated from. And so it took me a long time to work through those memories and heal and reconnect that part of myself that didn't want to sink into that memory, that experience. And I've done a lot of work, different healing modalities, spinal energetics, deep meditative, like where you bring the inner child feelings and emotions to the surface and actually allow yourself to feel through those experiences that was too much for me as a kid. But as an adult, I can now physically handle them, even though they're incredibly painful. I'm actually bigger, so I can handle them, and it's in a controlled environment. So lots of different modalities. I've tried brain spotting. I've tried like many, 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 many different things. And now the memories, I'm starting to see them through point of view, which is pretty, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And like the memories aren't great, but it's a sign that I'm really healing this whole part of myself, because I'm now able, I'm now able to be there. I'm now able to be there in those times that happened. So, yes. um so yeah, I where do I go from here? I'm going to have a sip of water. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I want to talk about life now and as an adult, and I went through many different, oh, my goodness, many, many, many different things. Many, many, many different things, as we all have. We've all gone through many, many, many different things, many different versions of ourselves, many different phases, many relationships. Da, da, da. I've actually been, before my husband, I was engaged twice. And so I've always been a relationship person. I've never been a once off here and there, one nighter. I've never been like that. It's always like relationship, long-term relationship. And I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn what I didn't want to learn what I do want. And a lot of my earlier relationships were with men that were much older than me. So me still searching for that kind of father figure with my father issues, daddy issues, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, they were never going to work from the beginning, but I had to go through. I had to go through them to learn and to heal. Doesn't mean there wasn't love in those relationships. Absolutely was. There absolutely was. And yeah, uh, yeah, there was definitely love, but it was all from me. I was trying to fill a hole from my childhood. And also I would enter into those relationships wanting to live out my childhood. I was searching for the father that I never had so that I could feel safe and and then be a kid. And then often I would take it really extreme and really be quite bratty and like, meh, because, I'm a kid and I never got one. I never got a childhood. So now you are going to deal with that, this person that I'm now with. So, I know that I am paying myself out to be a bit of an a-hole in those relationships. And I've fully forgiven myself and I fully love myself that I did those things, and I did those things from a place of survival. I was full blown in survival mode. I spent a lot of my life in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, literally trying to survive life, we can do some things that we can look back on and be not necessarily proud of. Do you know what I mean? And so I just want you to know, people out there who have survived some pretty extraordinary circumstances or survived through any kind of circumstance where you didn't feel safe. Whenever you don't feel safe, you feel threatened. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you're not feeling safe, you're feeling threatened. We go into fight or flight, freeze, fawn, right? And we only go there if we feel threatened. So if you have ever been in a threatening environment, in a threatening situation, and you've done something that you're not proud of or you feel shame for, I really invite you to give that part of yourself the biggest hug you could possibly give it, to love it, to nurture it, to care for it, to forgive. it because you cannot be blamed for what you do in a survival state. It's the argument of if a little kid, a little boy got kidnapped, right? And this person, this grown adult is, you know, going to do some crazy things to this kid, whatever. They've tied the kid up, and this kid has to, like, fight. This kid has no choice but to fight for his life. And in the process of fighting for his life, he's actually killed the person that kidnapped him. Now, who do you blame here? Who do you blame? Do you blame the person who kidnapped him, or do you blame the kid? The person who kidnapped him. You never blame the kid. The kid did what he had to do to survive that situation. Yeah, he might be traumatized from what he did. Absolutely. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, today I'm going to kill someone. I mean, very, very, very small percentage of people in the world wake up with that, right? And they have some issues. But the majority of us don't wake up in the morning thinking, yay, I'm going to murder someone today. No. When you do things in a survival state, you are literally surviving. Your body, your internal system doesn't know the difference between someone asking you a question and that putting you into a state of survival because of your past trauma and someone coming at you with a knife. It doesn't know the difference. It is still survival state. So when you are in a survival state, you may do some things that you later on feel shame for. But if you wouldn't blame the kid for killing his kidnapper to survive, then why are you blaming yourself for doing whatever you had to do to survive that situation? You can't. So you need to forgive yourself. You need to forgive yourself. And you need to forgive the kidnapper, because that is the only way that you can set yourself truly free. Holding on to anything is, that saying of, oh, how does it go? Something like, you want the other person to feel the pain, but actually you're the one drinking the poison. I know I totally butchered that saying, well, that quote or whatever, but you know what I'm saying, right? Holding on to anything, anger, and not forgiving is simply not allowing yourself to be free, to be set free. And it's not easy to do that. It is it's a process, and it's a declaration. I declare in this moment right now that I forgive myself, that I forgive my father for all that he did, all the wrong that he did. I forgive him. I'm forgiving him because you know what? Screw him. Screw him. He does not get to live with the satisfaction of ruining my entire life. You already took my childhood. It's not going to take the rest. And so if that means I've got to forgive him so that he doesn't have a hold on me any longer, freaking hey. I'm going to forgive the heck out of that man. He doesn't deserve a piece of me, any piece of me. So, I'm so grateful for every single person that is listening to this. And I realized partway through doing this that I spent a lot of time looking down and not even up at you, up at the screen, up at the camera. And that was because I was just so nervous and really scared. So looking down kind of, I guess, just made it feel a little bit more comfortable for me. But I'm going to sit up, my shoulders down and back and my chin up and look at you I'm looking at myself, so I don't know. It's a little bit confronting just looking at me. But I'm going to, because this is what I'm here for, to heal, right? Um, and I want to talk about my numerology and all of the things that I am obsessed with at the moment, which I will talk a lot about throughout my entire podcast. So I did a lot of things through my life that were, you know, self-healing, lots of different things. And I went crazy trying to push these things that I did on my family. Like, come on, like, you've got to heal, like this, push, 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 very pushy. And I'd spent a lot of my life not speaking. All of a sudden, I'm speaking. Not only am I speaking, I'm getting in your face and telling you, you have to do this, otherwise, blah, 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 blah. Just really not nice stuff. But all very well intentioned, all just from a place of love. I just didn't know how to actually communicate effectively. So it came across as just um anyway, so I did a lot of different things, and then I learnt numerology, and I'd always numbers, numbers, numbers for me in a world where nothing made sense. Nothing that was supposed to make sense made sense. Where nothing was reliable, nothing was sturdy, nothing was stable. Numbers have always been stable. You can never mess with the numbers, and I used to love maths. In school, I loved it. Oh my gosh, give me a 5-page equation any day. And I loved it because there's no questions about it. Here's the problem. And there are 3 different equations that you can use to solve this problem. And that is it. All you have to do is know what those equations are, and you can solve this problem, and you'll get the right answer every single time. And that, for me, that is reliable, that is stable, that is secure. I can depend on that. I can depend on those equations every single time. So numbers are unquestionable for me. So I've always had this relationship with numbers. The maths, well, how useful has maths been? And I was doing the kind of math that required 5 pages to get to an answer. And so that kind of maths is just completely not practical. Fast forward, my late teens, like 19, 20, whatever, I was living with a housemate. She one day she was sitting down with a notepad and scribbling away, and I was like, what are you doing? And she said, I'm doing a numerology reading or something like that, she said. And I thought, okay, freak. I have always had, from a very, very young age, these special abilities or gifts, kind of would go through life seeing people glowing. Sounds crazy, but I'd see people glowing either really bright or really dark. And the ones that were glowing dark, I kind of felt really scared of. The ones that were glowing light, I felt really like they could be safe. My grandmother, for instance, she had a really warm glow around her, and she was my favorite person growing up. My dad, very dark glow. Not my favorite person growing up. Yeah, and I'd always seen spirit. I've been seeing spirit since very, very young, and all versions of spirit. I've seen things that look like monsters, very scary, vicious looking things. I've seen old women. I think they're old women, all draped in black. They're sitting at the end of my bed. Women dressed in white, old men, just old men. I've seen old men walking through the house. Maybe they lived there in the past life or something. Seen kids, a lot of kids. Sometimes I would see animals, like cats especially. So always seen different things. Yeah, growing up, and always had this awareness that um, there was something else out there. Do you know what I mean? But because of the experiences that I had, particularly sexual abuse, when you have sexual abuse and you have these kind of abilities, something gets really messed up. And that's something that I'm learning about now, because I've I had some pretty, like, when I would often have some pretty harrowing experiences spiritually with some really dark entities that would often come and take over my body, particularly while the abuse was happening. And so my relationship to anything extraordinary was just terrifying. And so I shut that whole part of myself off for pretty much my whole life. Everything was like rational. I needed to rationalize everything. It didn't mean that I stopped seeing and feeling these things. I would just, rationalize it away. There's always a rational, explanation for everything. And if it wasn't science and I don't believe in it, you know what I mean? So only very recently, since actually really the birth of my son, and the not just at the birth, that was like the pinnacle, but the whole lead up to him was when I really started to open up in that sense. I'd done a lot of healing, physical healing, emotional healing, mental healing, psychological healing, energetic healing. But when it came to the spiritual side of myself, that's an area that I was like, not touching, because actually quite a big part of me that I was not touching. So now I'm touching it. Like it's touching me. Anyway, that's not the best wording. It's me. So yeah, I remember when I was giving birth to my son, I had this extraordinarily profound experience where, I was in a yogi squat. I mean, when I was literally birthing him. So I was in this yogi spot and I was yogi squat, sorry, and I was howling like this primal wild woman kind of howl. These sounds were coming out of me that I've never heard before in my life. And he was right on the edge of being in and out of me. Some people refer to this as the ring of fire. It was very profound. And my husband was right in front of me. His eyes were just on this emerging head. And I had shut my eyes for a split second. And when I opened them, I could see my husband here. But what I was seeing actually was this whole circle of women surrounding me in circle, and they were singing, they were chanting, they were drumming. And there was this one woman in the middle who she was, just her beauty. It was just like the kind of presence you just feel, you just can't speak. It's like, right? Just beautiful, dressed in this beautiful headdress, and just the most intricate and extraordinary, I don't know, outfit. I guess it doesn't seem like the right word, but she was extraordinary. And she wasn't playing any instruments. She wasn't even chanting. She was just a statue, standing so still, so grounded, so stable, so profoundly sure of herself, and just caught in her gaze. I was just totally caught in her gaze. And it was like in that moment, there was an exchange, you know, an agreement. This child is sacred. And I'm passing it on to you. It's like I'm passing this. This is a big responsibility that is now yours. Whoa, freaking profound. Later on, I had a psychic reading with the extraordinary Rachel Vaughan, who I hope to have on the podcast at some point, who confirmed those women were actually gathering in ceremony for the birth of this baby, because this baby, it like is actually of high royalty in wherever the spirit world is. High royalty. In fact, it's really out of the ordinary for this level soul to come into a human form. In fact, he never has before. This soul never has reincarnated as human before. This is his first time being a human, but that doesn't mean he's a new soul. He's a very ancient soul, a very high level royal soul, and apparently the psychic seemed really shocked by this, but he has kind of gotten to that level through pure ethical ways. So the fact that he's coming through now and chose me specifically is like a really big deal. So it makes sense that these women were coming. It was a ceremony for this soul coming, having its first human life. And the fact that, you know, it was actually having a human life was a big deal. So they were there in ceremony for that. And I've never forgotten that. It's been so in my heart since he was born. And this baby is definitely, oh, you know, he's leading the way in his life. He tells me what's what, you know. And I, even early on in my postpartum time with him, very, very, very early, like days in, I'd had this experience, but I hadn't had any, I had, you know, it took me a long time to process what happened. You know, I always used to say, I know, you know, my son was born, it was 13 and a half hours. It was the last half an hour that it was like active and like he's coming. And I'd always said, like, I kind of would have probably liked that last half an hour to maybe been an hour, even though the sensations in my body were very powerful, very, very, very intense. It was like it was happening out of my control, which is what you want actually when you're giving birth. You don't want to be in control, if that makes sense. You want to let go. You need to let go and go beyond what is comfortable, because you need to let go of your logical thinking brain that wants to control, and you need to give over to your primal mammalian instinct, your body, your body's knowing, your body's knowledge and wisdom, and your baby's knowledge and wisdom. You need to give over to that in order to birth. And which means your brain is like needs to switch off, but our brain wants to process everything. And so I always said I would have wanted that to be longer, because then maybe I could have processed it as it was happening. It took me time to process afterwards. Like, it was a lot. It was amazing. It was extraordinary, but it was a lot, and it happened out of my control. And that is, in any other situation in life where something happens out of my control, or if I don't feel in control, it's very triggering for me. It triggers my childhood, right? The trauma that I had, the abuse that I had, where I was very out of control. It triggers those feelings and emotions. And so giving birth, oh, well, that's something that, quite brought a lot of the same kind of feelings and emotions up where I wasn't in control. But I needed to not be. And it was profound healing that happened during that birth. But this birth propelled me. Yeah, so sorry. I remember saying to Ollie, I remember propping him up with all of the pillows, and I was just laying on my belly, my hands on my chin, just staring at this freaking extraordinary little human that had just come out of me. It was a pretty favorite pastime of mine, just staring at him for hours on end. And I remember saying to him that I'm only supposed to teach you how to use your human body, but you are teaching me everything else. There's so much that he is teaching me, showing me, that I have, he's just so, and I know every mother thinks so highly of their babies. This kid is really special. And we've had really amazing experiences with him. He has led me to the most extraordinary places. I mentioned my best friend in the whole world, my soul sister. We call each other each other's higher self, because it feels like we were living our life just half a soul each, and then when we came together, and we call it remet when we remet in this lifetime, we became one soul. And it was Ollie that actually led me to her, quite literally. We were about to move house, and I was in the throes of packing boxes, and we were not leaving the house that day, and Ollie, with his bare bum, he had nothing but a t-shirt on, no pants, no nappy, no shoes, nothing. I didn't have any shoes on. I wasn't prepared for a walk. We weren't going, and I resisted. He came up to me, grabbed my hand, and just pulled me. This kid had been walking since he was 8 months old. So he's always been on a mission. Everything he does with intention, like with purpose, with great purpose and intention. And so he grabbed my hand and was pulling. I resisted because I've got so much freaking packing to do, right? Anyway, I eventually just gave in and followed him. I can resist as much as I can, but he always wins. So he took me out the front door, and he literally led me out the front door, out of the gate, down the street, down the, turned the corner, down there. I didn't even know he knew the road, knew how to get to our local park, which is where he led me to. We got to the lights, and he gestured for me to push the button. He's about 17, 18 months at this point, so he couldn't reach the button, but, and as he waited for the little green man, he just stood there with his hands kind of like, folded, and waited. And as soon as he heard the little man, then he dragged me across the road. He dragged me through the gates of the park, all the way over, picked up a little handful of bark, and he led me directly over to this beautiful, extraordinary woman, her 2 kids and her husband, and he offered this, handful of bark as like, here's my offering, and here's my mum. And literally since that moment, we have been inseparable. This woman is like, where have you been all my life? And I've never felt so safe with another human being than I do with this woman. I mean, obviously other than my husband, but that's my husband, but with a woman, with another person, I've never felt this safe with anybody else ever in my life. And it's just extraordinary that my son led me to her. And the circumstances surrounding this is we were literally about to move out of this suburb, and we would have, if we didn't leave the house at that very moment, they were also about to leave the park. They were getting ready to go. And if we didn't leave in that very second that Ollie wanted to go, we would have missed each other. We never would have met. So we have seen wild koalas on evening walks that we were not going to go on. But because Ollie insisted, we saw them. We've seen families of dolphins. We the most amazing sunrises and sunsets, all because Ollie insisted. Not because we did, because Ollie did. And so I'm learning so much from him. So much. And he has demanded so much healing. Demanded for so much healing from myself, healing my inner child, my childhood trauma, all the cycles, generational cycles of what's been accepted over the generations in my family. He has demanded for all of this to be worked on, to be healed, so that it's not passed on to him. And I've promised him that it all stops with me. It all stops with me, and I'm ending those cycles. I don't want him to have to live any part of his life having to then heal from the trauma that I wasn't willing to heal from. And I know that he's going to have some kind of trauma in his life. You know what I mean? Like that's the human life. There's always going to be something to heal from, but I'd be damned if it's something that I didn't deal with from my past. So I'm going to do my absolute freaking best. Everything I have to do, including start a freaking podcast, because it's the number one most triggering thing for that part of me that does not want to speak at all, doesn't want to speak up, speak out, speak of truth. I will do that, because it ends with me. It ends with me, and I am creating generational wealth, ending generational trauma and creating generational wealth. That is my whole mission in life, not just for my family, for my son, my future kids, grandkids, generations ahead of me, but for, everyone in the world, right? It doesn't have to keep going. We don't have to accept any of it. So I've been propelled into this whole area, this whole part of myself, this whole spiritual side of myself since Ollie was born, to heal it, to know it, to learn it, to discover it, to experiment with it, to just get to know it, understand it. And I'm very much still at the early stages of that. So I will be evolving through this podcast. You will, if you stick with me, you will get to experience my spiritual evolvement. Is that a word? I don't know. Maturing, I don't know. Which is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And numerology is the one thing that's actually been the most amount of healing for me, because numbers, I love numbers. And of course, I came to numerology in the most ridiculous, like it all just fell into place, so I learnt numerology from an extraordinary woman who'd been doing it for like 25 years, I think, at that point. So nearly 30 years now. Who learnt from a man who'd been doing it for twice as long. And I really love that, I've learnt it from someone who the knowledge has been passed down like that. And it was amazing. It was kind of like numerology has been my kind of access into my psychic ability, those gifts that I was talking about, seeing glows around people and interacting with spirit and stuff like that. So it's kind of been my gateway into that, to open it all back up again. And I've been doing readings for people, just non-stop readings. And the more I read, the more I learn about the numbers and how how multidimensional they are. Numbers have been such a gift to my life, because I have been able to understand my family and myself from the perspective of numbers. And I now understand why I'm so different to the rest of my family. Most of my family all have very similar numbers, and I have very different numbers to most of my family. So it makes sense. I'm like, oh, we have different numbers. We have different freaking numbers. So we're going to be different. There's no way, no wonder why I never fit in with them, because I never can. You can't change the numbers that you're born with. Even if you change your name, the name that you were born with that gets put on your birth certificate is it's on your contract, your soul contract, you know, so this stays with you throughout your whole life. You cannot change the numbers that you were born with, and you can't then impact anybody else's numbers, no matter what you do, no matter what you say. You know, and I tried really hard, very in your face, to impact my family's numbers. I wish that I learned during that time that no matter what I do, I can't change their numbers. You know, so it when I realized this, when I learned this, it was like a huge weight off my back. I realized that they are quite literally on their own paths. Literally, before we come into each lifetime, into each reality, reincarnation, whatever you want to call it, we sign a contract that says everything that we are going to experience in this lifetime. We put it all on that contract. So everything I experienced early in my life, I had agreed to. I chose that. You know, I needed to, because without it, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be passionate about the things that I am today. I wouldn't have the eyes to see people and see people's truths in the way that I do now because of those experiences. It's given me great depth, you know, in understanding humanity, human behavior, understanding truth. So that's, you know, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for those experiences, for my dad doing what my dad did. I'm grateful because I'm grateful for where I am right now, the life I have now, and the purpose that I'm on, the mission that I'm on. So we all sign these contracts. We all have them. Every single person in my family has a contract, and whatever they've put on their contract is what they've put on their contract. There's nothing that I can do to impact what they have put on their contract, unless they've put it in their contract to allow me to impact them, to contribute to them, to make a difference to them. There's nothing that I can do. Oh. So what does that mean for me? It means I've got my path. I've got my own path to focus on. And through me focusing on my own path, my own truth, what I'm meant to be here, the frequency around me, the vibration around me will naturally rise, because we are extremely powerful. Each and every one of us are extremely powerful. And the moment we realize that, and the moment we realize that all we need to do to overcome anything in life, anything, anyone, no matter how terrifying, no matter how big, no matter how toxic, no matter what, no matter how much money they have, no matter what, all we have to do to overcome those things, to beat them, is to be our truth, live our truth, live and breathe our truth wholeheartedly, unapologetically. That is the most intimidating thing for these darker, lower level people, souls, whatever. Terrifying, because when you are living and breathing your truth, you are living and breathing the highest frequency that exists. And that is love. Love. You have to. You cannot live your truth through and through without wholly and completely loving yourself. That is an equation that does not add up. So living your truth is your access to loving who you are. When you love who you are, you cannot be messed with on any level. On any level. Physically, when you love yourself, you're not going to let anyone mess with you physically. You're not going to let anyone mess with you financially, emotionally, mentally. No, because you love yourself. You have profound respect for yourself. And when you are vibrating at such a high frequency, nothing can get in. Energetically, nothing can get in. Darkness cannot exist in the light. That is why they say when you are, saging your house, make sure you get into the corners and any shadows, because those are the only places that darkness can exist. Those dark energies, those dark entities can exist only in the shadows, only in the corners, right, where there are shadows. Dark cannot exist in the light. You are being light if you are being love. Darkness cannot exist where you are. So this is the podcast. This is the podcast. It is truth. It is truth. Real eyes, realize real lies. The lies that we have been told growing up is that we are small. We don't have voices. We don't want to be seen. We don't want to be heard. Those are all lies, that we are incapable, that we aren't enough, that we are this, we are that. Those are the lies. That we are powerless, insignificant, we make no difference, we are unimportant, we are stupid, we are fat, we are ugly, we are too black, too white, too tall, too short. These are the lies. Everything is just, don't be you. Just don't, whatever you do, don't be you. And my whole mission is to return you to you. Because you can't be messed with when you are being you. You cannot be messed with. So I do this through my work as a numerologist, my readings with people. My whole mission when I'm reading for them is to return them back to their truth so they cannot be messed with. I teach numerology in courses. I teach you everything you need to know to read numerology, read numbers. This is my way of returning groups, bigger numbers of people to their truth, all at the same time. One-on-one, I love reading for people one-on-one, but I've gotten to a point where it's not enough. It's not quick enough, I want to impact as many possible people as I possibly can. So that's why I teach it. And eventually I want to do workshops, like live in-person numerology workshops where I have like a whole group of people, like I don't know how many people, maybe 100. I don't know. Just putting it out there, universe. 100 people in a room, maybe more. And it's just one big, reading on a mass scale. I read for everybody. People get transformed and returned back to their truth on a massive scale. And when you do things in a group with other people, you start to realize that you're not the only one. You're not the only one. And so yes, after I gave birth the way I did, free birthing my son with just my husband present at home, and it was freaking orgasmic. I became obsessed with birth, and so I then went down a crazy obsessive journey of researching everything I possibly could about childbirth, about the system, about hospitals, about everything, and became a fierce advocate for mothering, for women, for the fact that women are the freaking most powerful species on the planet. We are. I'm sorry, but we are. We can grow, birth, and sustain life without needing anything external. Obviously, we need to eat, we need to sustain ourselves, but you know what I mean. So there's nothing more powerful than that. And this is going to be a lot about what my podcast will be about. It'll be about learning the truth from different people by listening to their stories of their birth, of their womanhood, returning women back to their power. There was a time when land was passed down from mother to daughter, not father to son, because it was recognized in the world that the mother-child relationship, is the most significant relationship that exists on the planet. So it made sense that the land, the possessions, the property was passed down from mother to daughter or mother to child. Isn't that just so insane to even consider in this day and age? So I really hope that this first episode has given you a good introduction, has really set the scene for what's to come. I am going to be inviting some really profound human beings on this podcast, all in the name of opening our eyes to realize the lies that we have been told, to learn the truth, no matter how deep, no matter how dark, no matter how ugly the truth is, no matter how hard it is to hear. We need to hear it. We need to hear the truth to return ourselves back to our own truth. The more truth we hear, the safer truth feels to share itself. So if you are someone who has listened to this episode and you have resonated with any part of what I've shared, and I really just let myself go in this episode, really just letting myself go to wherever I felt I needed to go, put no kind of limitation on myself, just share whatever came, because I felt like it was important to do that. So, I really didn't make much notes as I shared. So this, it kind of went in many different directions, and I don't know. I'm really hoping that it all made sense and there was some kind of flow to it. I'll have to listen to it back, although I kind of cringe at the thought of that. But anyway, so I hope that there is something in what I have shared here that you resonated with, and if there are people out there who listen to this, that's what I was saying, sorry, that resonated with any part of this, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll put all of my contact information in the places where they normally are, the show notes or whatever. I'm still learning all of the podcast lingo and what you do with podcasts, with like the notes and stuff. So forgive me, I'll get better at that. But yeah, please reach out to me. If you would like to book a reading with me, a one-on-one reading, you can do so via my website, which is georginagrace.net. It has my whole birth story on my website, which you are more than welcome to read. And also, if you are someone who you're going to give birth soon and you want to do some work or some preparation, I'm in the middle of writing my own birth course, but I do also offer consultations as well. So jump on my website, have a little look around, and if it feels right, reach out. I'm more than happy to book a session if you're interested in learning numerology. You can check that out on my website. My next course starts in May, at the end of May, 28th of May. So, and this is how I am going to be funding myself and my family with these courses and these readings. I'm choosing to not, advertise for other companies. I forgot what it's called, but I'm choosing not to do that. And so it's really just my readings, consultations, and courses that is going to be funding this and my family. So if you would like to support this podcast, if you would like to support me and my family, and so that I can keep doing this, keep bringing the truth to you and interview some freaking epic human beings, then it would be a win-win situation. You get the reading of your lifetime and I get to be supported by you. So thank you so much for listening. I'm on all the socials. When I say all, I just mean Facebook and Instagram. I'm also on Telegram. Just search Georgina Grace. I've just started a channel on Telegram, and this will be everywhere. So this will be on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and all the podcast places, I think. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to also give a shout out to my incredibly gifted husband, because he did this. All I have done is sit here and talk. He has done everything else. So all of the graphics, the video intro at the beginning of this podcast, which was so freaking cool. He created that. I gave him a very vague kind of like, this is what I kind of want, something like this. And then he created that, which I think is pretty freaking cool. He designed all of the logos, everything. He has done everything. So I just want to give my amazing husband a shout out and thank you so much. And if you are someone who is looking for someone to create things like that for you, videos, intros, logos, branding of any sort, videos, anything that you need for your business or podcast or whatever it is that you are creating or working on, you can definitely reach him through me. I am his biggest advocate. So yes. Send me an email at connect@georginagrace.net and I will put you in contact with the man himself. Okay, well, I have spoken a lot. These podcast episodes, much like this episode, I thought a lot about time limit. And I don't like limits. So they're just going to be open-ended. They'll go for as long as they need to go, for as long as the conversation is flowing, and they will just end naturally. So, which I'm excited about, because I get nervous when I have to fit into an hour time slot. I don't like that. It makes me talk really fast and I can't think and I get scattered and like that. So I'm just allowing them to flow organically and show up the way that they need to show up and end when they need to end. So I just wanted to introduce that part of the podcast as well to you, to just let you know, to help set the tone for the rest of the episodes. I'm so grateful for you being here, for you listening to me, to my story. And of course, there's so much of my story that I didn't share today, but will share over the course of this podcast. And I promise I will look up and look at you when I'm speaking to you, not down. So thank you so much for being here, for listening to me, listening to this story. I'm sorry if I offended anybody through this. That is not my intention whatsoever. With anything that I shared, this is truth from my perspective. This is my story from my perspective, and I can only tell it the way that it exists for me. And so if I have offended you, whether you are someone in my family or someone who is a religion or whatever that may be, I apologize. That is not my intention. My intention is to share the truth and to reach out to the people that want to hear it, that are ready to hear it, and that are ready to also join me in raising their vibrations and healing and learning the truth of the world, to open their eyes to realize the real lies. So I don't know, Corey asked me, my husband asked me if I was going to do some kind of sign off, and I don't even know what that is, but I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me in this journey of truth seeking and join me for the next episode. I love you so much. And I'm really grateful. So there we go. First episode done. Okay, I did it. I did it. I did it.